The machine rejected my card 3 times while everyone in line watched. Derek stood behind me, arms crossed, shaking his head like I was a child who couldn't handle basic adult responsibilities. When I turned to him for help, he simply walked away, leaving me there with a cart full of groceries and tears burning my eyes. 5 years later, he walked into my bank begging for a loan. The look on his face when the teller called me President Thompson was worth every sleepless night I'd endured to get there. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of First National Bank cast everything in harsh, unforgiving white as I stood at the teller window, my hands trembling slightly as I slid the withdrawal slip across the marble counter. $300. That's all I needed to cover the final payment for Mom's physical therapy sessions. Claire Thompson, the nameplate read as the teller examined my request with growing concern. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but this account shows insufficient funds, she said, her voice carefully modulated to avoid drawing attention from other customers. There's only $47.18 available. My stomach dropped. That was impossible. I managed our household finances meticulously, tracking every expense in color-coded spreadsheets that Derek constantly mocked as obsessive. I knew exactly how much should be in that account. Could you check again? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. There should be over $2,000. The teller's fingers clicked across her keyboard, her expression growing more sympathetic with each passing second. I show a large withdrawal made yesterday evening, $1,500 taken from the ATM on Morrison Street. Morrison Street, 3 blocks from Vanessa's apartment. My chest tightened as the pieces clicked into place. Derek had been working late again, or so he claimed. Those mysterious overtime hours that never seemed to appear on his pay stubs. Ma'am, is everything all right? The teller's voice seemed to come from underwater. Would you like me to print your recent transaction history? I nodded numbly, accepting the paper with hands that no longer felt like my own. There it was in black and white. Withdrawal after withdrawal, all from locations I never visited, all on days when Derek claimed to be putting in extra hours at ICE, the construction site. The pattern stretched back months. The elderly man behind me cleared his throat impatiently, and I stepped aside, clutching the evidence of my husband's betrayal. Outside the bank, I sat in my aging Honda Civic, staring at the transaction list until the numbers blurred together. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of trusting him with our finances while I focused on my part-time bookkeeping work and caring for my mother. My phone buzzed, a text from Derek. Working late again. Don't wait up. Working late. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. I started the car and drove aimlessly through Portland's tree-lined streets, past the coffee shops where we used to spend lazy Sunday mornings, past the park where he'd proposed on one knee beside the duck pond. Everything looked the same, but I felt like I was seeing it all for the first time, through eyes that finally understood how naive I'd been. When I pulled into our driveway 2 hours later, Derek's truck was already there. The living room glowed, with the blue light of the television, and I could hear him laughing at some comedy special. The sound grated against my raw nerves. "Hey, babe," he called without looking away from the screen as I walked in. "How'd it go with your mom's appointment?" I sat down beside him, the transaction history folded in my pocket like a loaded weapon. Actually, there was a problem at the bank. They said we don't have enough money to cover the payment. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's impossible. I just deposited my paycheck on Friday. The teller showed me our balance. $47, Derek. Where did the money go? He finally turned to look at me, his brown eyes filled with what I now recognized as practiced innocence. I don't know, Claire. Maybe there's some kind of bank error. You know how these things get mixed up sometimes. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that I almost believed him. Almost. This was the man who'd held me when I cried after my father's funeral, who'd painted our bedroom lavender because he knew it was my favorite color, who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, the same man who was now looking me straight in the eye and lying about stealing our savings. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly. "I'll call them in the morning." Relief flickered across his features. "Good idea. I'm sure they'll figure it out." That night, I lay awake listening to Derek's steady breathing, planning my next move. I knew I couldn't confront him directly. Not yet. I needed more information, more proof. Most importantly, I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. The next morning, I waited until Derek left for work before driving back to First National. I requested a complete transaction history for the past year, watching as months of deception printed out in neat chronological order. The pattern was clear and devastating. Every few weeks, substantial withdrawals from locations across the city, restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I couldn't afford, shopping centers where Derek claimed to hate going. Armed with addresses, I spent the day playing detective. The Italian restaurant on 23rd Street where Derek had supposedly never eaten confirmed that yes, he was a regular customer. Always with the same woman, a blonde who drove a red convertible. The hotel on the waterfront had seen them monthly for the past 8 months. The jewelry store clerk remembered them picking out matching bracelets just last week. By evening, I had a complete picture of my husband's double life. Derek Thompson, devoted husband and hardworking construction foreman, was actually Derek Thompson, serial cheater and financial manipulator. He'd been systematically draining our accounts to fund his relationship with someone else, leaving me to struggle with basic expenses while he played the generous boyfriend. I drove to Vanessa's apartment complex that night, parking across the street with a clear view of her building. I didn't have to wait long. Derek's truck pulled up at 7:30, and I watched him climb the stairs to the second floor carrying a bottle of wine and what looked like takeout from the expensive sushi place downtown. Through her window, I could see them embracing, laughing, playing house with my money. The woman was younger than me, maybe 28 to my 35, with the kind of effortless beauty that Derek had always claimed didn't matter to him. She worked at the marketing firm where Derek's company had done some renovation work 2 years ago. I remembered him mentioning her name a few times, always casually, always in passing. Vanessa this, Vanessa that. I'd been so trusting, so secure, in our marriage that it never occurred to me to be suspicious. I sat there for 3 hours, watching them move around her apartment like they'd been together for years. When Derek finally emerged at 11, kissing her goodbye at the door, I felt something inside me break and rebuild simultaneously. The Claire who had driven here was gone. In her place sat someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more determined. The confrontation I'd been dreading came sooner than expected. The next afternoon, I was organizing my mother's medications when Derek walked into the kitchen with an expression I'd never seen before. Guilt mixed with defiance, like a child caught, stealing who was angry at being discovered. "We need to talk," he said, setting his keys on the counter with deliberate care. "About what?" I kept my voice neutral, curious to see how much he was willing to admit. "About us. About our marriage." He ran his hands through his dark hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. "Claire, I haven't been happy for a long time." There it was, the classic cheater's playbook. Make it about feelings, about incompatibility, about anything except the conscious choice to betray and steal. "What do you mean?" I asked, still playing innocent. "We've grown apart. You're so focused on your mother, on your little bookkeeping jobs, on everything except us. I feel like I'm married to a stranger." The audacity was breathtaking. I was focused on everything except us because I was the only one actually maintaining our life while he played fantasy romance with his girlfriend. "So what are you saying, Derek?" "I think we should separate. Take some time to figure out what we both want. I nodded slowly, as if considering this revelation. And where would you go during this separation? I've already found a place. Nothing fancy, just somewhere to clear my head. Vanessa's apartment, no doubt. I wondered if she knew she was about to become a rebound housing solution. What about money? Our accounts, the house payments, my mother's medical expenses. Derek's discomfort was palpable. We'll figure that out. Maybe you could ask your mother to help with her own bills for a while. My 72-year-old mother, living on Social Security and Medicare, should help with bills that Derek had made impossible to pay by stealing our savings. The suggestion was so cruel, so callous, that I finally understood exactly who I'd married. When were you thinking of moving out? I asked. This weekend. I think it's better if we do this quickly, like removing a bandage. More like abandoning a sinking ship he'd deliberately sabotaged. That night, after Derek went to bed, I began my own preparations. If he wanted to end our marriage, I wouldn't fight him. But I also wouldn't let him destroy me financially in the process. I spent hours researching divorce laws, asset protection, and my rights as a spouse. I printed everything, storing the documents in a box I hid in my mother's garage. I also began documenting everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every lie. I photographed our belongings, recorded the current state of our home, and compiled evidence of Derek's systematic theft of our joint funds. If this was going to get ugly, I wanted to be prepared. Friday afternoon, Derek came home with boxes and a rental truck. He'd brought his friend Marcus to help, a decent guy who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. "You sure about this, man?" Marcus asked as they loaded Derek's dresser. Claire's good people. "It's complicated," Derek replied, not meeting his friend's eyes. I watched from the kitchen window as they packed up 15 years of shared life. Furniture we'd picked out together, appliances I'd researched and saved for, tools Derek had bought. With money from our joint account. He was taking whatever he wanted and leaving me with the bills. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Claire," he said, appearing in the doorway as Marcus loaded the last box. "I know this is hard, but it's for the best." "Is it?" I asked. "We both deserve to be happy." "And you think this will make you happy?" Something flickered across his face then, a moment of uncertainty that was quickly suppressed. "I think it's our best chance." After they left, I sat in our suddenly cavernous living room, surrounded by the gaps where Derek's belongings used to be. The silence was profound, but not uncomfortable. For the first time in months, I could think clearly without the constant hum of underlying tension that had become the soundtrack of our marriage. I made a list. First, I needed to protect what little money remained in our accounts. Second, I needed to find a job that paid enough to cover the mortgage and my mother's expenses. Third, I needed to figure out how to rebuild my life from the ground up. The first item was easier than expected. A quick visit to my lawyer confirmed that I could freeze our joint accounts pending divorce proceedings. Derek's theft was well documented, and the court would likely order him to repay what he'd taken. The second item was more challenging. My part-time bookkeeping clients provided steady but modest income. I needed something bigger, something with growth potential. That's when I remembered my college friend Rachel, who worked in finance in Denver. We'd kept in touch sporadically over the years, exchanging Christmas cards and the occasional social media comment. She'd always encouraged me to use my accounting degree for something more ambitious than balancing small business books. I called her that Sunday evening after spending the weekend alone in my empty house. "Claire?" Rachel's voice was warm and surprised. "What a wonderful surprise! How are you?" "Actually, not great," I admitted. "Derek and I are getting divorced, and I need to make some major changes in my life." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" I gave her the abbreviated version, careful not to dwell on the details that still felt too raw to share. Rachel listened without judgment, offering the kind of practical sympathy that reminded me why we'd been friends for so long. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "we just had an opening in our compliance department. It's entry-level, but it's with a growing fintech company, and there's room for advancement. You'd be perfect for it." "In Denver?" "In Denver. Sometimes a geographic change is exactly what you need for a fresh start." A fresh start. The phrase resonated in ways I hadn't expected. Portland held too many memories, too many reminders of the life I'd thought I was living. Maybe what I needed wasn't to rebuild in the same place, but to build something entirely new somewhere else. "Tell me more about the job," I said. Rachel described Mountain View Credit Union, a forward-thinking financial institution that specialized in serving small businesses and first-time homebuyers. They were expanding rapidly, implementing new technologies and looking for detail-oriented people who could grow with the company. "The salary isn't huge to start," she warned, "but there are bonuses, benefits, and real opportunities for promotion. Plus, Denver's great. You'd love it here." I made the decision that night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and the silence of my empty house. I would sell everything, take the job in Denver, and start over completely. Not running from my problems, but running toward something better. The next month passed in a blur of preparation. I filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and Derek's financial misconduct. My lawyer was optimistic about recovering the stolen funds, though she warned it might take time. I put the house on the market, sold most of our furniture, and arranged for my mother to move in with my sister in nearby Beaverton. Derek appeared sporadically during this process, usually to collect more of his belongings or to argue about asset division. He seemed genuinely shocked that I was planning to leave Portland. "You can't just move to Colorado," he said during one particularly heated conversation. "This is your home." "This was our home," I corrected. "Now it's just a house I can't afford, full of memories I don't want." "What about your mother? Your clients? You're throwing away everything you've built here." The irony was staggering. Derek, who had thrown away our marriage for his affair, who had stolen our savings to fund his deception, was lecturing me about making impulsive decisions. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said calmly. "I'm choosing to start fresh somewhere. That doesn't remind me of how naive I used to be." Something in my tone must have warned him off, because he didn't argue further. I think he was beginning to realize that the compliant, trusting wife he'd married was gone, replaced by someone he didn't recognize and couldn't manipulate. The house sold quickly in Portland's hot real estate market. After paying off the mortgage and Derek's court-ordered debt repayment, I had enough money to make a genuine fresh start. Not wealthy, but not destitute either. Enough to rent a small apartment in Denver and survive until my new job's paychecks started coming in. My last night in Portland, I drove through the city one final time. Past the bank where I'd discovered Derek's betrayal, past the park where he'd proposed, past all the places where I'd been happy before I knew better. I felt no sadness, only a profound sense of completion. That chapter of my life was closed, and tomorrow, I would begin writing a new one. The moving truck pulled away from my house at dawn, carrying the few possessions I'd decided to keep. My car was packed with clothes, important documents, and my grandmother's jewelry, the only truly valuable things Derek hadn't been able to touch. As I drove east through the Columbia River Gorge, watching the sun rise over the mountains, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Denver welcomed me with crisp mountain air and endless blue skies. My apartment was tiny but clean, with windows that faced west toward the peaks I was already beginning to love. Mountain View Credit Union's offices were modern and bustling, filled with the kind of energy that comes from a company on the rise. My first day was overwhelming in the best possible way. Rachel had been right about the growth potential, the Compliance department was small but crucial, responsible for ensuring that all of the credit union's innovative practices met federal banking regulations. My background in accounting made the work intuitive, and my attention to detail the same. Trait Derek had mocked as obsessive was exactly what the job required. "You're going to fit right in," said Helen Carter, my supervisor, as she showed me to my desk. "We need people who can see the big picture while managing the small details." Within weeks, I was handling complex regulatory filings and working directly with the executive team. The work was challenging but satisfying in ways my old bookkeeping jobs had never been. I was using my brain, solving problems, and contributing to something bigger than myself. My colleagues were smart, driven people who treated me as an equal from day one. There was no condescension, no suggestion that I was just filling time until something better came along. For the first time in years, I felt professionally valued. The personal transformation was slower but just as significant. Denver forced me to rebuild my social life from scratch, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I joined a hiking group, took evening classes in financial analysis, and gradually constructed a circle of friends who knew me only as Claire Thompson, the competent credit union employee, not Claire Thompson, the woman whose husband had left her for someone younger. 6 months into my new life, I was asked to join a special project team developing new lending protocols for small businesses. The work required late nights and weekend meetings, but I didn't mind. I had energy for the first time in years, and the project was genuinely important. That's how I met Nathan Cross. Nathan Cross walked into the conference room like he owned the building, which, as I would later learn, he practically did. Tall and lean with prematurely silver hair and intense green eyes, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something significant from nothing. He was Mountain View Credit Union's largest private investor and the founder of Cross Financial Group, a boutique investment firm that specialized in community banking innovations. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced our CEO, Patricia Wells, "I'd like you to meet Nathan Cross. He'll be consulting with us on the small business lending expansion." Nathan's handshake was firm, his smile genuine but measuring. "I'm looking forward to working with your team. Patricia tells me you've put together something special here." Our project leader, Marcus Rivera, launched into his presentation about streamlined approval processes and risk assessment algorithms. I took notes diligently, but found myself studying Nathan's reactions more than the slides. He asked pointed questions that revealed a deep understanding of both the technical and human sides of banking. When Marcus finished, Nathan leaned back, in his chair. "Impressive work," he said. "But I think you're missing something crucial. The algorithms are solid, the processes are efficient, but where's the personal touch? Community banking succeeds because it serves real people with real stories, not just credit scores and debt-to-income ratios." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Our entire presentation had focused on automation and efficiency, the very things Nathan was questioning. "What would you suggest?" Patricia asked. Nathan's gaze swept the room before settling on me. "What do you think, Ms. Thompson? You've been taking notes, but I haven't heard your perspective." All eyes turned to me. 6 months ago, I would have deferred to my colleagues, played it safe, avoided drawing attention. But that woman had been left behind in Portland, along with everything else from my old life. "I think Mr. Cross is right," I said, my voice steady despite the sudden attention. "We're treating loan applications like widgets on an assembly line. But small business owners aren't widgets. They're people who are often risking everything they have on a dream." Nathan nodded encouragingly. "Go on?" "A hair salon owner who wants to expand isn't just looking for capital. She's looking for someone who understands that her business is also her community gathering place, her artistic expression, and her family's future. Our algorithms can tell us if she can make the payments, but they can't tell us if she has the heart to make her business succeed." "Exactly," Nathan said, leaning forward. "So how do we quantify heart?" The question hung in the air, challenging and complex. I thought about my own journey, about the difference between surviving and thriving, between going through the motions and truly investing in your future. We don't quantify it, I said finally. We recognize it. We create space in our process for loan officers to tell the whole story, not just the numbers. We look for evidence of commitment, community ties, adaptability. We ask better questions. Nathan smiled, the first completely unguarded expression I'd seen from him. That's the most sensible thing anyone said in this room all morning. After the meeting, Nathan approached me at the coffee station. You have experience with small business owners? I used to do bookkeeping for several local businesses in Portland, I said, then immediately wondered why I'd mentioned my previous city. I usually kept my past vague. Portland's loss is Denver's gain, then. I'd like to hear more of your thoughts on the lending project. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? I hesitated. In my previous life, Derek would have made some comment about my lunch meetings, some subtle suggestion that I was overstepping or getting above myself. The automatic refusal was on my lips before I caught myself. Yes, I said. I'd like that. Nathan chose a small bistro near the office, the kind of place where the servers knew the regulars by name, and the menu changed with the seasons. We talked shop initially, diving deep into the challenges of community banking in an increasingly digital world. But gradually, the conversation became more personal. You have an interesting perspective on financial security, Nathan observed as we shared a dessert. Most analysts think about it in terms of numbers and projections. You talk about it like it's something that can be lost and rebuilt. I chose my words carefully. I think security is more fragile than people realize, and more achievable than they imagine. Experience talking? Sometimes the best education comes from the hardest lessons. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. I started Cross Financial after my first company went bankrupt. Learned more about business in those 6 months of failure than I had in the previous 6 years of success. There was something refreshing about his honesty, his willingness to admit vulnerability. Derek had always presented himself as infallible, incapable of real mistakes or genuine self-reflection. Over the following weeks, Nathan became a regular presence at Mountain View Credit Union. The small business lending project evolved under his guidance, incorporating the human elements we'd initially overlooked. My role expanded as well. Patricia asked me to serve as the primary liaison with Nathan's team, which meant longer hours, but also access to strategic conversations I never would have been included in before. You're wasted in compliance, Nathan told me one evening as we reviewed loan application prototypes. Have you ever considered moving into investment analysis? I don't have the background for that, I said automatically. You have the mind for it. Background can be learned. The idea intrigued me more than I wanted to admit. Compliance was safe, predictable, well-defined. Investment analysis was dynamic, challenging, potentially lucrative. It was also the kind of career that required confidence and ambition, qualities I was still rediscovering. Cross Financial is always looking for talent, Nathan continued. Especially people who understand both the analytical and human sides of finance. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity to consider what you want your career to look like in 5 years. That night, I sat in my small apartment looking out at the Denver skyline, thinking about futures and possibilities. A year ago, I'd been balancing checkbooks for corner stores and beauty salons, married to a man who saw my work as a hobby rather than a profession. Now I was discussing investment strategies with one of the most successful financial consultants in the region. The transformation wasn't just professional. I'd lost 20 pounds without trying, the stress weight that had accumulated during the final years of my marriage melting away as my confidence returned. My hair was longer, my clothes more polished, my posture straighter. I looked like someone who belonged in boardrooms and strategy sessions. More importantly, I felt like That person. The decision to leave Mountain View Credit Union wasn't easy. Patricia had been a wonderful mentor, and I'd built genuine friendships with my colleagues. But Nathan's offer was too compelling to ignore. Senior investment analyst at Cross Financial Group, with a salary that doubled my current income and opportunities for advancement that didn't exist in the credit union's smaller structure. "I'm proud of you," Patricia said when I gave my notice. "And I'm not surprised. You have a gift for seeing the big picture while managing the details. That's rare in this industry." My last day at Mountain View was bittersweet. Helen threw a small party in the conference room, complete with cake and speeches about my contributions to the lending project. Several colleagues asked me to stay in touch, invitations that felt genuine rather than perfunctory. "You're going to do great things at Cross Financial," Marcus said as he walked me to my car. "Nathan doesn't hire people unless he sees real potential." Cross Financial Group occupied 2 floors of a glass tower in downtown Denver, with views of the mountains that took my breath away every morning. My office was small but had a window, a luxury I'd never experienced before. The work was exactly as challenging as Nathan had promised, involving complex financial modeling, risk assessment, and client relations. My first major project involved analyzing potential investments for a tech startup incubator. The company wanted to expand into fintech, funding early-stage companies that were developing new banking and payment technologies. My job was to evaluate which startups showed the most promise and recommend funding levels. "Trust your instincts," Nathan advised during our first project meeting. "The numbers will tell you if a company is financially sound, but only your judgment can tell you if they're going to succeed." I spent weeks interviewing startup founders, reviewing business plans, and analyzing market trends. The work required me to think strategically about entire industries, not just individual companies. It was intellectually demanding in ways that energized rather than exhausted me. One company particularly caught my attention. CloudVault Financial was developing a platform that would allow small banks to offer sophisticated digital services without the massive infrastructure investments typically required. The founder, Sarah Kim, was a former bank executive who understood both the technological and regulatory challenges involved. "Most fintech companies are trying to disrupt traditional banking," Sarah explained during our meeting. "We want to empower it. Give community banks the tools they need to compete with the big players while maintaining their local relationships." Her vision aligned perfectly with everything I'd learned during the Mountain View Credit Union project. After extensive analysis, I recommended CloudVault as Cross Financial's largest investment in the incubator fund. "You're betting big on this one," Nathan observed when I presented my recommendation. "Sometimes you have to take calculated risks to achieve meaningful returns," I replied, using language I'd learned from watching him work. "Sounds like you're learning to think like an investor." The CloudVault investment proved prescient. Within 6 months, 3 major community banks had signed licensing agreements, and the company's valuation had tripled. Nathan made sure I received credit for identifying the opportunity, which led to a promotion and a significant bonus. "You have a natural talent for this work," he told me during my performance review. "I'd like to give you more responsibility. How do you feel about client development?" Client development meant traveling, making presentations, and building relationships with high-net-worth individuals and institutional investors. It was a significant step up from analysis work, requiring skills I wasn't sure I possessed. "I think I'd like to try," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. My first major client presentation was to the board of a family foundation that was considering diversifying their investment portfolio. I spent days preparing, rehearsing answers to every possible question, creating visual aids that would make complex financial concepts accessible to non-experts. "Remember," Nathan coached me beforehand, "they're not just buying our investment strategy, they're buying our expertise, our judgment, and our commitment to their success." The presentation went smoothly until one board member asked a question I hadn't anticipated. Ms. Thompson, this is impressive work, but you're quite young. How do we know you'll still be here in 5 years to manage our investments? The question stung, but I understood the concern. In an industry where relationships often lasted decades, I was asking them to trust someone with relatively little experience. You're right that I'm newer to this industry than some of my colleagues, I said carefully. But that also means I'm building my reputation on every client relationship, every successful investment, every promise kept. I can't afford to be careless with your trust because my entire career depends on earning and maintaining it. The board approved our proposal unanimously. Well done, Nathan said afterward. You turned a weakness into a strength. That takes confidence and quick thinking. As my client base grew, so did my income and professional reputation. I moved from my small apartment to a 2-bedroom condo with mountain views, bought my first new car, and began building an investment portfolio of my own. The financial security I'd lost when Derek betrayed me was not only restored, but exceeded. More significantly, I was building something that belonged entirely to me. No joint accounts, no shared assets, no vulnerability to another person's poor decisions or moral failures. Every dollar I earned, every investment I made, every professional relationship I built was mine alone. 2 years into my tenure at Cross Financial, Nathan approached me with an unexpected proposition. I'm thinking about expanding the firm, he said during one of our regular strategy meetings. Opening a branch office in Seattle, focusing on Pacific Northwest clients who want more personalized service than the big firms provide. That sounds like a natural expansion, I agreed. I'd want you to head it up. Full partner track, equity stake, your name on the door eventually. The offer was everything I'd never dared to dream of during my marriage to Derek. Financial independence, professional recognition, the opportunity to build something significant from the ground up. It would mean relocating again, Nathan continued. I know you've built a life here in Denver. I looked around his office, taking in the mountain views and the city I'd come to love. Denver had been my sanctuary, the place where I'd rebuilt myself from the ground up. But it had always been a way station, not a destination. Actually, I said, I think Seattle sounds perfect. The decision to accept Nathan's offer felt like the natural next step in a journey I was finally controlling. Seattle represented not just professional advancement, but proof that I could succeed anywhere, build meaningful relationships in any city, thrive in whatever circumstances I chose to create. Planning the Seattle expansion consumed months of work. I traveled to the Pacific Northwest regularly, scouting office space, meeting potential clients, and building relationships with local financial institutions. The work was demanding, but exhilarating, combining all the skills I'd developed over the past 3 years. Nathan proved to be an excellent business partner, trusting my judgment while providing guidance when I needed it. Our working relationship had evolved into genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared professional goals. You've come a long way from compliance work, he observed one evening as we celebrated signing the lease for our Seattle office space. Sometimes I can barely remember who I was before all this, I admitted. The best part is that you did it yourself. I may have provided opportunities, but you earned every success, every promotion, every client's trust. His words meant more than he probably realized. For too many years, I'd defined my worth through other people's opinions and needs. Derek's approval, my mother's comfort, my client's satisfaction. Building something based on my own skills and judgment felt revolutionary. The Seattle office opened 6 months later, occupying a full floor of a downtown building with views of Elliott Bay. Cross Financial Northwest, as we named it, specialized in serving entrepreneurs, tech executives, and family businesses throughout the region. I hired 3 analysts and 2 client relationship managers, building a team that reflected the collaborative, personal approach that had made Nathan's original firm successful. Our first major client was exactly the kind of relationship I'd hope to build. Pacific Innovations was a clean energy company founded by two former Microsoft engineers who were developing next-generation battery technology. They needed sophisticated financial management as they scaled their operations and attracted institutional investors. "We've worked with the big firms," explained co-founder Jennifer Walsh during our initial meeting. "But they treat us like just another account. We want partners who understand our industry and our goals." "That's exactly what we're here to provide," I assured her. "Your success is our success." The Pacific Innovations relationship became a model for our approach. Instead of simply managing their investments, we helped them develop financial strategies that aligned with their business objectives. When they needed additional capital for expansion, we connected them with investors from our network. When they considered international partnerships, we provided market analysis and risk assessments. "You've become our unofficial CFO," Jennifer joked during one of our quarterly reviews. "That's the highest compliment you could give me," I replied, and meant it. By the end of our first year in Seattle, Cross Financial Northwest was managing over $50 million in client assets and had established relationships with major players throughout the Pacific Northwest business community. Industry publications began featuring my work, and I was invited to speak at conferences about community-focused financial services. The professional success was deeply satisfying, but the personal growth was even more significant. I'd built a new life entirely on my own terms, surrounded by colleagues who valued my judgment and clients who trusted my expertise. The woman, who had once been abandoned at a bank, humiliated and financially vulnerable, had become someone who helped others achieve their financial goals and dreams. That's when Derek walked back into my story. I was reviewing quarterly investment reports when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Ms. Thompson, there's a Derek Sullivan here to see you. He says it's about a business loan consultation." The name hit me like a physical blow. Derek Sullivan. He'd taken his middle name as his surname, probably to distance himself from the reputation damage his company had suffered in Portland. I set down my pen carefully, my hands steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. "Did he mention which company he represents?" I asked, my voice level. "Sullivan Construction Services. He said it was regarding expansion financing. So he'd rebranded the family business along with himself." Derek had always been skilled at reinvention when it served his purposes. I wondered what desperate circumstances had driven him to Seattle, to my office, to asking for help from someone he'd never expected to see again. "Send him in," I said. I had 30 seconds to prepare myself. 30 seconds to transition from the successful financial executive I'd become back to the woman whose husband had once left her stranded and humiliated. But as I straightened my shoulders and smoothed my tailored jacket, I realized something profound had shifted. I wasn't that vulnerable woman anymore. I was the one holding the power now. Derek walked through my office door looking older than his 42 years. His dark hair showed streaks of premature gray, and his face carried lines that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. His expensive suit couldn't quite hide the fact that he looked worn down, desperate. He stopped short when he saw me, his confident stride faltering. For a moment, pure shock replaced his carefully constructed businessman's mask. "Claire!" His voice cracked slightly on my name. "Mr. Sullivan," I replied coolly, not rising from my desk. "Please have a seat. I understand you're interested in discussing financing options for your construction company." Derek remained standing, staring at me as if I were an apparition. "I don't understand. What are you doing here? How are you?" "I'm the managing partner of Cross Financial Northwest," I said simply. "We specialize in business development loans and investment services for Pacific Northwest companies. Would you like to discuss your financing needs, or would you prefer to schedule this meeting for another time?" My professional demeanor seemed to shake him out of his stupor. Derek slowly took the chair across from my desk, his eyes never leaving my face. I could see him trying to reconcile the woman before him with the wife he'd abandoned 3 years ago. "You look different," he said quietly. "People change." I opened a new file on my computer. "Now tell me about Sullivan Construction Services. What kind of expansion are you considering?" Derek fumbled with his briefcase, pulling out a folder of documents with hands that shook slightly. "We're looking to expand into the Seattle market, residential and commercial construction. We have contracts lined up, but we need capital to purchase equipment and hire additional crews." I accepted his business plan and financial statements, scanning them with the practiced eye I'd developed over the past 3 years. The numbers told a story of consistent struggle, narrow profit, margins, and mounting debt. This wasn't a thriving company looking to grow. This was a failing business desperately seeking a lifeline. "Your debt-to-equity ratio is concerning," I observed, keeping my tone neutral. "And I see several outstanding judgments from suppliers and subcontractors." "Those are temporary setbacks," Derek said quickly. "The construction industry in Oregon has been challenging, but Seattle's market is booming. We just need working capital to get established here." I continued reading, noting discrepancies between projected revenues and realistic market assessments. Derek had always been optimistic about his business prospects, but these projections bordered on fantasy. "Mr. Sullivan, these revenue projections seem aggressive given your company's historical performance. What makes you confident you can achieve this level of growth in a new market?" Derek shifted uncomfortably. "We have experience, established relationships with suppliers, a solid reputation." "Do you?" I pulled up a credit report on my computer screen. "Because your credit rating suggests otherwise. And these supplier relationships you mention appear to have resulted in several liens against your company assets." The color drained from Derek's face as he realized I wasn't going to simply accept his optimistic presentation at face value. This wasn't a courtesy meeting with a small-town banker who might be swayed by charm and promises. This was a professional evaluation by someone who understood exactly how to dissect a business plan. "Look, Claire," he said, abandoning his formal approach. "I know this is awkward, but I really need this loan. The business is sound. I just need someone to believe in it." "Ms. Thompson," I corrected. "And belief isn't how we evaluate loan applications. We look at cash flow, asset values, market conditions, and management competency." Derek's jaw tightened. "Management competency?" "Your financial records show a pattern of overextending on projects, failing to collect receivables in a timely manner, and inconsistent profit margins. These suggest systemic management issues rather than temporary market challenges." I was being deliberately harsh, but not unfairly so. Everything I was saying was documented in the papers he'd provided. Derek had simply never had anyone with the expertise to point out these patterns so clearly. "I've learned from those mistakes," he insisted. "That's why I'm starting fresh in Seattle." "Starting fresh?" I repeated. "Is that what you call leaving? Behind outstanding debts and legal obligations?" Derek's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Actually, I do. I've spent the last 3 years learning exactly what I'm talking about." I closed his file and leaned back in my chair. "Mr. Sullivan, based on your company's financial history and current obligations, Cross Financial Northwest cannot approve your loan application. You can't be serious. You haven't even looked at the contracts I have lined up." "I've looked at everything I need to see. Your company represents exactly the kind of risk we don't take." Derek stood abruptly, his composure finally cracking completely. "This is because of us, isn't it? You're punishing me for what happened between us." "What happened between us?" I asked quietly. "Remind me." "Don't play games, Claire. You know what I'm talking about." I know that you systematically stole money from our joint accounts to fund an affair. I know that you left me at a bank, unable to pay for my mother's medical expenses because you'd cleaned out our savings. I know that you abandoned our marriage for another woman and left me to deal with the financial wreckage alone. Derek's anger faltered as I laid out the facts in the same calm tone I used for client presentations. That's not how it happened. That's exactly how it happened. But you're wrong about my motivation for denying your loan. I'm not punishing you for being a terrible husband. I'm protecting my client's investments by refusing to fund a business with a documented history of poor management and financial instability. So that's it? You won't even consider it? Mr. Sullivan, if you'd like a second opinion, I can refer you to other financial institutions in the area. However, I suspect you'll receive similar responses once they review your credit history and financial statements. Derek stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him struggling to process this new version of me. The wife he'd left behind had been financially dependent, professionally insecure, and emotionally vulnerable. The woman sitting across from him now controlled millions of dollars in investment capital and spoke his language better than he did. "How did this happen?" he asked, his voice hollow. "How did you become this?" "I became what I always had the potential to be," I replied. "I just needed to be in an environment where that potential was recognized and valued." "And you couldn't have done that in Portland, in our marriage?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications Derek probably hadn't intended. I considered how to answer, weighing honesty against professionalism. "Our marriage was built on the assumption that I was fundamentally less capable than you," I said finally. "Less intelligent, less ambitious, less worthy of respect and consideration. That assumption made it impossible for either of us to see who I really was." Derek sank back into his chair. "I never thought you were less intelligent." "You thought." "My work was a hobby. You made financial decisions without consulting me. You dismissed my concerns as nagging and my insights as irrelevant. Whether you consciously thought I was less intelligent or not, you certainly treated me that way. I was trying to protect you, to handle the difficult things so you didn't have to worry about them. You were trying to control me. And when control wasn't enough, you replaced me." Derek rubbed his face with both hands. "Vanessa and I broke up 6 months ago." I felt nothing at this revelation. No satisfaction, no vindication, no curiosity about what had gone wrong. Vanessa Price was a chapter in someone else's story now. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it in the abstract way you might feel sorry for any stranger's personal difficulties. "Are you married now?" Derek asked suddenly. "My personal life isn't relevant to this business discussion." I saw the ring. I glanced at my left hand, where a simple platinum band caught the afternoon light streaming through my office windows. Nathan and I had married 6 months ago in a small ceremony overlooking Puget Sound, witnessed by our closest friends and colleagues. It had been everything my first wedding wasn't: intimate, honest, and based on genuine partnership rather than romantic fantasy. "Yes, I'm married," I said. "To someone in finance? To someone who values my judgment and respects my capabilities." Derek winced as if I'd slapped him. "Claire, I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we had 15 years together. That has to count for something." "It does count for something. It taught me exactly what I don't want in a relationship." "So, you'll help other businesses, other families, but not me?" "I help viable businesses with sound management and realistic growth plans. Your company doesn't meet those criteria." Derek gathered his papers slowly, defeat evident in every movement. "You've really changed." "I've grown into who I was always meant to be." He paused at the door. "Are you happy?" The question surprised me with its sincerity. For a moment, Derek sounded like the man I'd once thought I'd married rather than the stranger who had betrayed and abandoned me. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm happy." "Good," he said, and something in his voice suggested he might actually mean it. "You deserve that." After Derek left, I sat in my office watching the Seattle skyline as afternoon faded into evening. The encounter had been less traumatic than I'd expected, but more significant in ways I was still processing. Seeing Derek again had crystallized just how completely my life had transformed. 3 years ago, I'd been financially dependent on a man who saw me as a burden to be managed rather than a partner to be valued. Now I was financially independent, professionally respected, and personally fulfilled. The contrast was so stark it felt almost surreal. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "How did the big client meeting go today?" I smiled, remembering that I'd told him about an important presentation I was giving to a potential new client. I hadn't mentioned Derek's name or our history, just that I had a challenging meeting scheduled. "Interesting," I texted back. "Tell you about it over dinner." "Can't wait. Pick up wine on your way home?" Home. 6 months into our marriage, Nathan and I had bought a house in one of Seattle's hillside neighborhoods, a craftsman-style home, with a view of the water and enough space for both of our home offices. It was the first house I'd ever owned entirely in my own name, the first space that reflected my tastes and needs rather than someone else's preferences. That evening, I told Nathan about Derek's visit while we cooked dinner together, a ritual we'd established early in our relationship. Nathan listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions about the business aspects of the meeting. "Sounds like you handled it perfectly," he said as we sat down to eat. "Professional but firm." I kept waiting to feel angry or vindicated, or something dramatic, I admitted, but mostly I just felt sorry for him. He looked so diminished. "That's probably because you've moved beyond needing any particular response from him. The power dynamic has shifted completely." Nathan was right. 3 years ago, Derek's approval or disapproval had carried enormous weight in how I saw myself. Now his opinion was irrelevant to my sense of worth or success. The emotional hold he'd once had over me was completely broken. "Do you think I was too harsh?" I asked. "About the loan, I mean." "Were your assessments accurate?" "Completely." "His company is a terrible risk." "Then you did your job." Personal history doesn't change fiduciary responsibility. This was one of the things I loved most about Nathan. He understood the difference between emotional reactions and professional obligations, and he trusted my judgment in both arenas. Over the following weeks, I found myself thinking about Derek's visit less and less. It had been a significant moment, but not a defining one. I was too busy building my actual life to spend much time analyzing my former one. Cross Financial. Northwest continued to grow. We signed 3 new major clients, including a tech startup that was developing environmental monitoring software, and a family-owned shipping company that was expanding into Asian markets. Each new relationship reinforced my confidence in the business model Nathan and I had developed. I also began getting recognition within the broader financial community. The Pacific Northwest Business Journal named me one of their 40 under 40 rising executives, and I was invited to join the board of a nonprofit organization that provided microloans to women entrepreneurs. "You're becoming quite the local celebrity," Nathan observed one morning as he read a profile of me in the business section of the Seattle Times. "It feels strange," I admitted. 3 years ago, I was completely invisible. Now people know my name. "You were never invisible. You were just in the wrong environment to be seen." Nathan had a gift for reframing my experiences in ways that honored my growth without dwelling on past pain. He helped me understand that my transformation wasn't about becoming someone new, but about finally having the space and support to become who I'd always been capable of being. 6 months after Derek's visit, I received an unexpected phone call from my former lawyer in Portland. Derek had filed for bankruptcy, and his creditors were pursuing collection on the court-ordered repayment of the money he'd stolen from our joint accounts. "He's claiming inability to pay," my lawyer explained. "But I wanted you to know that we're continuing to pursue the judgment. If he ever comes into money again, you'll be entitled to collect." I thanked her for the update, but realized I no longer cared about the money Derek owed me. The amount was significant by my old standards, but negligible compared to my current income. More importantly, I'd moved so far beyond needing anything from Derek that even justice felt unnecessary. "Let it go," I told the lawyer. "I don't want to spend any more time or energy on this." "Are you sure? It's a substantial amount." "I'm sure. Close the file." That evening, I told Nathan about the call. "I think that's the last connection I had to my old life," I said. "It feels good to let it go." "How do you feel about Derek losing everything?" I considered the question carefully. Sad for him, I guess, but not responsible for it. He made his choices, and this is where they led. No desire for revenge? No satisfaction that he's struggling? None. His life has nothing to do with mine anymore. Nathan smiled and pulled me close. "That's how I know you're completely free of him. When someone else's success or failure doesn't affect your emotional state, you've achieved true independence." True independence. The phrase resonated deeply. For too many years, my sense of worth had been tied to other people's opinions and needs. Derek's approval, my mother's comfort, my client's satisfaction. Building something based entirely on my own skills and judgment felt revolutionary. As Cross Financial Northwest approached its second anniversary, Nathan and I began discussing expansion again. This time, the conversation centered on opening offices in Portland and San Francisco, creating a regional presence that could serve entrepreneurs and growing companies throughout the West Coast. "Are you ready to go back to Portland?" Nathan asked during one of our planning sessions. "As a visitor, yes. As someone who belongs there, no. That's not my city anymore." "It might be professionally satisfying to return as the successful executive you've become." "It might be," I agreed. "But I don't need that satisfaction. I know who I am now, regardless of who remembers who I used to be." The Portland office opened 18 months later, occupying a full floor of a downtown building just 6 blocks from the bank, where Derek had once left me stranded and humiliated. I didn't mention that coincidence to anyone, but I was aware of it every time I visited our new location. During the Portland office's opening celebration, I ran into several people from my old life. My former bookkeeping clients, neighbors from the house Derek and I had shared, even a few mutual friends who had stayed in touch sporadically over the years. Their reactions ranged from surprise to admiration to barely concealed envy. "Claire?" "Thompson," exclaimed Janet Morrison, who had lived across the street from Derek and me. "I heard you'd moved to Colorado, but I had no idea you'd become such a success." "Life takes unexpected turns," I replied diplomatically. "Derek's business went under, you know. He's working for someone else now, doing project management. I heard he'd had some difficulties." "Everyone always said you were the smart one in that marriage." "Guess they were right." I smiled politely and changed the subject. Derek's current circumstances weren't my concern, and rehashing old neighborhood gossip felt beneath the person I'd become. The most significant encounter came near the end of the evening when Patricia Wells approached me at the reception. My former boss at Mountain View Credit Union looked exactly the same, warm and professionally polished. "Claire," she said, embracing me warmly, "I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. When I heard Cross Financial was opening a Portland office, I hoped you'd be involved." "Patricia, it's wonderful to see you. How are things at Mountain View?" "Growing steadily, thanks in part to the foundation you helped lay with the small business lending project. We still use the protocols you developed with Nathan." We talked for 20 minutes about industry trends, mutual colleagues, and the evolution of community banking. It was a conversation between equals, two successful executives who had helped shape their organization's directions. "You know," Patricia said as our conversation wound down, "I always knew you had executive potential. I'm glad you found the right opportunity to develop it. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't quite believe in myself. That's what mentors are for. And now you're mentoring others, I assume?" "Every chance I get." Driving back to Seattle that night, I reflected on how different the Portland visit had felt from what I'd expected. I'd thought returning to my former city might trigger nostalgia, or regret, or some complicated emotional response. Instead, it had felt like visiting a place where I'd once lived rather than returning home. Portland was part of my history, but Seattle was my present and future. Nathan was waiting up when I got home, reading in bed with jazz playing softly in the background. He looked up as I entered our bedroom, his smile warm and welcoming. "How did it go?" "Better than I expected. Less emotional than I'd feared." "Any regrets about the move to Seattle?" I kicked off my heels and began changing into comfortable clothes. "None whatsoever. Portland feels like someone else's life now." "Good," Nathan said, setting aside his book. "Because I have some news that's going to make Seattle feel even more like home?" I looked at him curiously. "What kind of news?" Cross Financial Northwest just landed the biggest client in our firm's history. Pacific Maritime Industries wants us to handle their complete investment portfolio, $200 million in assets. I sat down hard on the edge of the E. $200 million? Congratulations, partner. You just became one of the most successful financial executives in the Pacific Northwest. As I processed this news, I realized that Derek's visit had been more than a personal milestone. It had been the symbolic end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The woman who had once been left stranded at a bank was now managing investment portfolios worth more than most people could imagine. But the real victory wasn't the money or the prestige or the professional recognition. The real victory was knowing that I'd built this success myself, on my own terms, and that no one could ever take it away from me again. The Pacific Maritime Industries account transformed Cross Financial Northwest from a successful regional firm into a major player in West Coast finance. Managing their $200 million portfolio required expanding our team, implementing new technologies, and establishing relationships with institutional partners across multiple markets. It was exactly the kind of challenge I'd dreamed of when I first walked into Nathan's conference room 4 years earlier. "We need to hire at least 6 new analysts," I told Nathan during our Monday morning strategy meeting. "And we'll need someone with international experience for their Asian shipping routes." "Any candidates in mind?" "Actually, yes. Remember Sarah Kim from CloudVault Financial? She's been looking for new opportunities since they went public. Her background in both technology and international finance makes her perfect for this role." Nathan nodded approvingly. "Reach out to her. We also need to consider office space. The maritime account alone will require dedicated conference rooms and specialized equipment." These were the kinds of problems I loved solving. Growth problems, success problems, the challenges that came from building something significant rather than just surviving. Every decision we made rippled outward, affecting not just our company, but our employees, our clients, and the broader business community we served. The hiring process took 3 months, during which I interviewed dozens of candidates and carefully assembled a team that reflected both the technical expertise and collaborative culture Nathan and I valued. Sarah Kim accepted our offer enthusiastically, bringing with her 2 junior analysts from her previous firm who specialized in emerging markets. "This feels like joining a family rather than just a company," Sarah observed during her first week. "Everyone here seems genuinely invested in each other's success." "That's intentional," I explained. "We've learned that sustainable growth requires sustainable relationships, both internal and external." The expanded team allowed us to take on additional clients without compromising the personalized service that had become our trademark. a boutique hotel chain seeking expansion capital, a renewable energy startup developing wind farm technology, a family-owned aerospace manufacturer transitioning to civilian applications. Each relationship brought unique challenges and opportunities. But it was the call from Marcus Rivera that truly surprised me. My former colleague from Mountain View Credit Union was now running his own financial consulting firm and had been approached by a group of investors interested in acquiring distressed construction companies throughout the Pacific Northwest. They want to buy them cheap, restructure the operations, and either resell or integrate them into a larger construction conglomerate, Marcus explained during our lunch meeting. It's a sound strategy if they can identify companies with good underlying assets but poor management. And you thought of me because? Because you have the analytical skills to evaluate these companies properly and the industry connections to understand their real value. Plus, your firm has the capital to participate in the investment if you find opportunities that meet your criteria. The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than 2 years after Derek had begged me for a loan to save his failing construction company, I was being asked to help identify and acquire similar distressed businesses. The cycle of success and failure in the construction industry was predictable, driven by market fluctuations, poor financial management, and overextension during boom periods. Send me the preliminary list, I told Marcus. I'll have my team do initial assessments. The list contained 43 companies across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. Most were small to medium-sized operations that had overextended during the recent construction boom and were now struggling with debt, supply chain issues, and contract disputes. A few names were familiar from my Portland days, companies Derek had mentioned as competitors or potential partners. One name made me pause: Reynolds Construction, Derek's father's original company, apparently still operating under a different management structure. According to the preliminary report, the company had been sold 18 months earlier to a management group that included Derek's younger brother Michael, whom I remembered as more business-savvy than Derek, but lacking in construction experience. Interesting portfolio, Sarah commented as she reviewed my assessments. Several of these companies have solid asset bases but chronic cash flow problems. Classic turnaround candidates. What's your recommendation? Orstock, focus on the companies with established client relationships and good reputations, but temporary financial difficulties. Avoid anything that shows signs of systematic management failures or legal complications. Sarah's analysis aligned with my own instincts. We identified 12 companies worthy of deeper investigation, including 3 that could potentially be acquired at significant discounts to their asset values. The due diligence process would take months, but the potential returns were substantial, enough to justify the investment in time and resources. Nathan supported the expansion into distressed asset acquisition, seeing it as a natural evolution of our expertise in business valuation and restructuring. We're not just providing capital, he observed. We're providing management expertise and strategic guidance. That's exactly the kind of value-added investment that generates sustainable returns. The acquisition process proved more complex than I'd anticipated. Each target company had unique challenges requiring customized solutions. Union negotiations, environmental compliance issues, equipment valuations, customer relationship assessments. Every aspect of their operations needed to be thoroughly understood before we could develop realistic turnaround strategies. The first acquisition was Pacific Northwest Roofing, a Seattle-based company that specialized in commercial projects, but had been nearly bankrupted by a single large contract that went bad. The owner, a 60-year-old craftsman named Robert Chen, had built an excellent reputation over 30 years, but lacked the financial sophistication to navigate complex contract disputes. I know roofing, Robert told me during our negotiation meetings, but I don't know lawyers and accountants and all the paperwork that comes with these big jobs. I just want to do good work for fair pay. That's exactly what we want to help you achieve, I assured him. Our goal isn't to change what you do well. It's to handle the business side so you can focus on the roofing. The Pacific Northwest Roofing acquisition became our template for future deals. We retained existing management for operational decisions while providing financial oversight, legal support, and strategic planning. Robert remained as general manager. His son David took over project management, and we hired a business manager to handle contracts and customer relations. Within 6 months, Pacific Northwest Roofing was profitable again and bidding on projects they never could have handled before. The transformation required minimal capital investment but significant management expertise, exactly the kind of value creation that justified our involvement. "You've given me my company back," Robert said, during one of our quarterly reviews. "Better than it ever was, but still mine." The success of the Pacific Northwest Roofing turnaround generated interest from other potential sellers and established Cross Financial Northwest's reputation in the distressed asset market. We began receiving unsolicited approaches from business owners facing financial difficulties, brokers representing troubled companies, and even bankruptcy attorneys looking for alternatives to liquidation. One such approach came from an unexpected source. Michael Reynolds called my office on a Thursday afternoon, identifying himself as the new owner of Reynolds Construction and requesting a meeting to discuss strategic partnerships and potential investment opportunities. I recognized the name immediately but wasn't certain if Michael knew about my connection to Derek. The Reynolds family had been prominent in Portland's construction community for decades, and it was possible Michael was simply reaching out to financial firms that specialized in his industry. "Schedule the meeting," I told my assistant. "But do some background research on both Michael Reynolds and the current status of Reynolds Construction." The research revealed a complicated story. Derek's father had built Reynolds Construction into one of Portland's most respected residential contractors, with a reputation for quality work and fair dealing. When Derek took over the company, those standards had gradually deteriorated due to his poor management and financial decisions. By the time Derek filed for bankruptcy, the company's reputation was severely damaged and its client base had largely moved to competitors. Michael Reynolds had purchased the company name, some equipment, and existing contracts for a fraction of their original value. He'd spent the past 18 months rebuilding relationships with suppliers, hiring experienced project managers, and slowly re-establishing the quality standards his grandfather had originally implemented. The effort was showing results, but the company still struggled with cash flow and limited access to credit due to its recent bankruptcy history. "It's actually a compelling turnaround story," Sarah observed as we reviewed Michael's business plan. "He's addressing the fundamental management issues that caused the original failure, but he needs capital to pursue larger projects. What's your assessment of his leadership capabilities?" "Based on the financial improvements over the past 18 months, significantly better than his predecessor. The company's margins are improving, customer satisfaction scores are up, and he's built a solid management team." Michael Reynolds proved to be everything his older brother wasn't: thoughtful, detail-oriented, willing to admit what he didn't know and seek expert advice. During our initial meeting, he presented a comprehensive business plan that addressed every concern I might have raised about construction industry investments. "I know the Reynolds name carries some baggage in this market," Michael acknowledged directly. "My brother made some poor decisions that damaged our family's reputation, but I believe the underlying business model is sound, and I'm committed to rebuilding what my grandfather created." "What makes you think you can succeed where your brother failed?" "Because I understand that construction is both a craft and a business." Derek focused on the craft side and ignored the business fundamentals. "I've spent the past 5 years studying finance, project management, and operations optimization specifically to avoid repeating his mistakes." Michael's honesty about Derek's failures was refreshing, but I wondered how much he knew about my personal connection to the situation. Before making any investment decision, I needed to address the potential conflict of interest directly. "Mr. Reynolds, I should disclose that I have a personal history with your brother. Derek was my ex-husband." Michael's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't seem entirely surprised. I thought you might be. Derek mentioned that his ex-wife had become successful in finance, but he never told me your name or which firm you worked for. Does that knowledge change your interest in working with Cross Financial? Actually, it increases it. If Derek hurt you financially and you still built this level of success, that tells me you have exactly the kind of resilience and determination I want in a business partner. Michael's response impressed me with its directness and emotional intelligence. Unlike Derek, he seemed capable of separating personal relationships from business decisions and acknowledging uncomfortable truths without defensiveness. Tell me about your plans for the company's future, I said. Michael outlined an ambitious but realistic growth strategy focused on sustainable expansion, quality control, and strategic partnerships. He wanted to rebuild Reynolds Construction's reputation gradually, taking on projects that showcase their capabilities while maintaining the profit margins necessary for long-term stability. I'm not interested in being the biggest contractor. In Portland, he explained, I want to be the most reliable one, the company my grandfather would be proud of. The Reynolds Construction investment required more careful consideration than our previous acquisitions. The company's troubled history created reputational risks, and my personal connection to Derek added layers of complexity that didn't exist with other deals. Nathan and I spent hours discussing the potential benefits and drawbacks. The financial fundamentals look solid, Nathan observed. Michael's management has improved every key metric over the past 18 months. But are you comfortable with the personal aspects? Honestly, I think working with Michael might provide a kind of closure I didn't know I needed. Derek destroyed something his family had built over generations. Helping Michael rebuild it feels like restoring balance. And if Derek finds out about the investment? Derek's opinion is irrelevant to this decision. This is about Michael's capabilities and the company's potential, not about my relationship with his brother. We structured the Reynolds Construction investment as a combination of working capital loans and equity participation, giving us significant influence over strategic decisions while allowing Michael to maintain operational control. The terms included performance benchmarks, financial reporting requirements, and approval rights for major contracts. This partnership will only succeed if we're completely transparent with each other, I told Michael during our final negotiation session. I'll expect detailed monthly reports, advance notice of any significant challenges, and your commitment to the conservative growth strategy we've outlined. You'll have all of that, Michael assured me. I've seen what happens when family businesses prioritize ego over fundamentals. I won't make that mistake. The Reynolds Construction investment announcement generated significant attention in Portland's business community. Industry publications noted the irony of Derek's ex-wife funding his family's company reconstruction, though most coverage focused on the financial aspects rather than personal drama. Local financial executive leads construction industry turnaround, read the headline in the Portland Business Journal. The article positioned me as an expert in distressed asset acquisition and highlighted Cross Financial Northwest's growing influence in Pacific Northwest business development. Derek himself remained notably absent from any public commentary about the investment. According to Michael, his brother was working as a project manager for a mid-sized contractor in Beaverton and had expressed no interest in involvement with the family company's reconstruction. Derek knows about the investment, Michael told me during one of our monthly reviews. He actually said he was glad to see the Reynolds name might mean something positive again. How did he seem when he said that? Tired, honestly. Like he'd finally accepted responsibility for the mistakes he made. I felt a surprising pang of sympathy for Derek, though I had no desire to contact him directly. The man who had once confidently expected success handed to him was apparently learning to accept a more modest role in the world. That kind of humility might have saved our marriage if he'd found it earlier. The Reynolds construction turnaround proceeded smoothly. Through its first year under our partnership, Michael's conservative approach and attention to detail produced steady growth without the boom and bust cycles that had characterized Derek's management. The company completed a series of successful residential projects, established relationships with new commercial clients, and built cash reserves that provided security against market fluctuations. "We're actually ahead of our projections," Michael reported during our year-end review. "Customer satisfaction scores are the highest they've been since my grandfather ran the company." "What's your biggest challenge going forward?" "Scaling. The operation without losing the personal touch that makes us different. We're getting requests for larger projects, but I want to make sure we can deliver the same quality that's rebuilding our reputation." Michael's concern reflected exactly the kind of thoughtful leadership that distinguished successful family businesses from those that failed during transition periods. He understood that growth required maintaining the values that created success. In the first place, the broader construction industry acquisition portfolio continued expanding as word spread about our approach to distressed asset turnarounds. We acquired partial ownership in 7 companies over 18 months, each requiring customized restructuring strategies, but all benefiting from our combination of capital, expertise, and strategic guidance. We're becoming known as the go-to firm for construction industry turnarounds, Sarah observed during one of our team meetings. "That's a valuable market position, but it also means we're being approached by increasingly complex situations." She was right. Our latest potential acquisition involved a large commercial contractor with union disputes, environmental compliance issues, and multiple pending lawsuits. The potential returns were substantial, but so were the risks. Complex situations generate the highest returns if managed properly, I replied. But they also require the most careful due diligence and the strongest management partnerships. As Cross Financial Northwest's reputation grew, so did the speaking invitations, board appointments, and industry recognition that came with success. I was asked to keynote conferences, serve on nonprofit boards, and provide expert commentary for business publications. Each opportunity reinforced our firm's position as a leader in sustainable business development. The personal satisfaction of these achievements was profound, but what mattered most was the knowledge that I'd built something meaningful that would outlast any individual success or failure. Cross Financial Northwest employed 37 people across 3 offices, managed over $400 million in client assets, and had helped dozens of businesses achieve sustainable growth. "You've created something remarkable," Nathan observed one evening as we reviewed our latest quarterly reports. "Not just financially, but culturally. We've proven that you can be successful without sacrificing integrity or personal relationships." "We've proven that together," I corrected. "None of this would have been possible without the partnership we built." Nathan smiled and reached across our kitchen table to take my hand. "Ready for the next challenge?" "What did you have in mind?" "There's a community bank in San Francisco that's looking for new ownership. They want to maintain their local focus while expanding their capabilities. Sounds like exactly the kind of opportunity we've been preparing for." A community bank acquisition would represent the largest and most complex project in our firm's history, requiring regulatory approval, substantial capital investment, and expertise in an entirely new area of financial services. It was exactly the kind of challenge that would have terrified me 5 years earlier and excited me now. "Tell me more," I said, already mentally organizing the due diligence process we'd need to complete. The Golden Gate Community Bank acquisition took 8 months to complete, involving federal regulators, state banking authorities, and enough paperwork to fill several conference rooms. But when we finally received approval to purchase the 70-year-old institution, it felt like the culmination of everything Nathan and I had been building toward. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to our assembled team in the main conference room of our San Francisco office, "Cross Financial Northwest is now officially Cross Financial Group, with full-service banking capabilities across 3 states. The applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Sarah Kim had relocated from Seattle to oversee the bank's technology integration. Michael Torres joined us from Wells Fargo to head consumer lending, and we'd retained most of Golden Gate's existing staff to maintain continuity for their long-term customers. "This is more than an acquisition," Nathan added. "It's proof that community-focused financial services can compete at the highest levels while maintaining the personal relationships that make banking meaningful." The bank transformation required everything I'd learned about business development, team building, and strategic growth. We modernized their technology systems while preserving the neighborhood bank atmosphere that customers valued. We expanded their lending capabilities while maintaining their conservative risk assessment standards. Most importantly, we created new opportunities for their employees while honoring the culture that had sustained the institution for 7 decades. "You've managed to upgrade everything without losing what made us special," observed Helen Martinez, the bank's longest-serving employee, during our 6-month review. "A lot of new owners come in and try to change everything immediately." "Change for its own sake destroys value," I replied. "We only changed what was necessary to help you serve your customers better." The bank's performance exceeded our projections from the first quarter. Deposits increased by 12% as word spread about our enhanced services. Loan volume grew steadily without compromising credit quality, and customer satisfaction scores reached new highs. We'd successfully demonstrated that traditional community banking could thrive with modern management and adequate capital. The success attracted attention from regulatory agencies, industry publications, and potential partners throughout the financial services sector. I was invited to speak at the American Bankers Association annual conference about sustainable community bank ownership models, and several business schools requested case studies on our acquisition and integration strategy. "You've become something of a celebrity in banking circles," Nathan observed one morning as he read a profile of me in American Banker magazine. "The article calls you a visionary leader who's redefining community finance for the 21st century." "It's gratifying," I admitted, "but the real measure of success is whether we're actually helping people achieve their financial goals." That measurement came in the form of hundreds of individual stories. The young family who got their first mortgage through our streamlined approval process. The immigrant entrepreneur who received a small business loan after being turned down by larger institutions. The retirement age couple who finally found investment advice that prioritized security over aggressive returns. Each success reinforced my understanding that finance, at its core, was about enabling people to build the lives they wanted. Numbers and algorithms mattered, but they were tools for achieving human outcomes, not ends in themselves. The 3-year anniversary of Derek's desperate visit to my Seattle office arrived without fanfare, marked only by my assistant's routine scheduling email that included the date. I realized I hadn't thought about Derek in months, a sure sign that whatever emotional hold that relationship had once maintained was completely severed. My life had become too full of meaningful work and genuine relationships to spare mental energy for past grievances. Nathan and I had settled into the comfortable rhythm of a partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. Cross Financial Group employed 68 people and managed over $700 million in assets. I served on 3 nonprofit boards, spoke regularly at industry conferences, and mentored young professionals who reminded me of my former self. "Any regrets about the path you chose?" Nathan asked one evening as we walked along the San Francisco waterfront near our second home. "None whatsoever," I replied without hesitation. Every difficulty led to something better. Every closed door opened a window to opportunities I never could have imagined. Even the painful parts? Especially the painful parts. They taught me what I was capable of surviving and thriving through. The conversation was prompted by news we'd received that afternoon. Derek had been hired as a project manager for a construction company in Sacramento. apparently making a genuine effort to rebuild his career through competent work rather than grand gestures. According to Michael, his brother seemed more grounded and realistic than he'd been in years. He asked about you, Michael had mentioned during our quarterly Reynolds construction review. Not in any inappropriate way. He just wondered if you were happy. What did you tell him? That you seemed to be living exactly the life you wanted to live. That assessment felt accurate. My happiness wasn't dependent on external validation or dramatic achievements, but on the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful with people I respected and cared about. The woman who had once measured her worth through her husband's approval now found fulfillment in her own accomplishments and the positive impact she could have on others. The phone call that would bring Derek back into my story one final time came on a Tuesday morning in late October. My assistant buzzed through with unusual hesitation. Ms. Thompson, I have a Derek Sullivan on the line. He says it's regarding a business matter and that you'll understand what it's about. Derek Sullivan, still using his middle name as his surname, apparently. I hadn't heard his voice in over 3 years, not since that awkward meeting in my Seattle office when he'd begged for a loan I couldn't possibly approve. Put him through, I said, curious about what desperate circumstances might have driven him to contact me again. Claire, Derek's voice was subdued, lacking the entitled confidence that had once characterized his every interaction. Thank you for taking my call. I know this is awkward. What can I do for you, Derek? I'm calling about Reynolds Construction, about the investment you made with Michael. I tensed slightly. Is there a problem? No, nothing like that. Actually, the opposite. The company is doing so well that Michael wants to expand into commercial projects, and he asked me to help with some of the initial bids. This was unexpected. Michael had never mentioned involving Derek in Reynolds Construction's future plans, though it made sense from a practical standpoint. Derek's construction experience, for all his management failures, was extensive and valuable for specific technical applications. Michael's decision to hire you is his business decision, I said carefully. Cross Financial's investment is based on Michael's leadership and the company's performance. I understand that, and I want you to know that I'm not looking for any special treatment or trying to complicate your business relationship with my brother. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be part of rebuilding something I helped destroy. Derek's tone was markedly different from our previous conversation. Gone was the defensive anger and entitled expectation. In its place was something I'd never heard from him before: genuine humility. Why are you calling me about this? I asked. Because I wanted you to hear it from me rather than through Michael or in some industry publication. And because I owed you an apology I should have given years ago. Derek, you don't need to. Yes, I do. What I did to you, to our marriage, to our finances was inexcusable. I blamed you for things that were my responsibility. I betrayed your trust repeatedly, and I left you to deal with consequences that were entirely my fault. The apology was more complete and self-aware than anything I'd expected from Derek. But I also realized it didn't change anything fundamental about my life or feelings. I appreciate you saying that, I replied honestly. But I hope you understand that I've moved far beyond needing that apology for my own peace of mind. I do understand. Michael told me about your success, about the life you've built. I'm genuinely glad for you, Claire. You deserved better than what I gave you, and I'm glad you found it. Thank you. One more thing. I want you to know that working with Michael has taught me things about business and responsibility that I should have learned decades ago. If Reynolds Construction succeeds in this expansion, it'll be because you gave Michael the resources and guidance to make it happen. I'm grateful for that, even if I have no right to be. After Derek hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the San Francisco Bay, processing our conversation and my reaction to it. I felt no anger, no satisfaction, no particular emotion all beyond a vague sense of completion. Derek had become a person who existed in my past, rather than someone whose actions could affect my present. The Reynolds construction expansion proceeded successfully over the following months. Michael's conservative approach and Derek's technical expertise proved complementary, producing bid proposals that won several significant commercial projects, without overextending the company's capabilities. My investment continued generating solid returns while supporting family business restoration and local job creation. "It's working out better than I hoped," Michael reported during our year-end review. "Derek's involvement is strictly limited to project planning and technical consultation. He understands that I make all business decisions and that our partnership with Cross Financial is my responsibility." "And how is Derek adjusting to that arrangement?" "Better than I expected. He seems genuinely committed to doing good work without trying to control outcomes he's not responsible for." The transformation sounded authentic, though I had no desire to witness it personally. Derek's personal growth was irrelevant to my life beyond its impact on business relationships I cared about maintaining. The final unexpected encounter came at the Pacific Northwest Construction Industry Awards dinner, an annual event recognizing outstanding projects and business achievements throughout the region. Cross Financial Group was being honored for our role in supporting construction industry development, and Reynolds Construction had been nominated for a residential restoration project that exemplified quality craftsmanship and sustainable business practices. I was accepting our award when I spotted Derek at a table near the back of the ballroom. He was dressed professionally but conservatively, sitting with what appeared to be colleagues rather than trying to work the room as he once would have. When our eyes met briefly, he nodded politely and looked away, making no attempt to approach or create any awkward interaction. "That's Derek, isn't it?" Nathan asked quietly, following my gaze. "Yes, and that's exactly how these encounters should go." Polite acknowledgement and nothing more. Nathan squeezed my hand supportively. "You've handled all of this with remarkable grace." "I've had excellent partners and teachers," I replied, thinking of all the people who had supported my transformation over the years. During the reception following the awards ceremony, I was approached by dozens of industry colleagues, potential clients, and young professionals seeking career advice. The conversations were energizing and productive, reinforcing the professional network that had become one of my most valuable assets. As the evening wound down, I made one final round of the reception area, saying goodbye to various contacts and exchanging business cards with potential future partners. That's when I found myself face to face with Derek one last time. "Claire," he said simply, "congratulations on the award. Well deserved." "Thank you. And congratulations to Reynolds Construction on the nomination." "Michael did that. I just helped with some of the technical aspects." We stood there for a moment, two people who had once shared a life now existing in completely separate worlds. I felt no animosity, no lingering attachment, no particular emotion beyond mild curiosity about how strange life's circumstances could be. "You look happy," Derek said finally. "I am. I'm glad. You always deserve to be." "Good luck with the construction work," I said, meaning it sincerely. "It sounds like you've found a good situation with Michael's company." "I have. Thank you for making it possible." We shook hands briefly, professionally, and parted ways for what I knew would be the final time. As Nathan and I walked to our car, I reflected on how differently that interaction had felt from our previous encounters. No drama, no emotional weight, no significance beyond two former acquaintances acknowledging each other's existence. "How do you feel?" Nathan asked as we drove through the Seattle streets toward our hotel. "Complete," I said after thinking about it. "Like a circle that's finally been closed." "Any part of you nostalgic for what you used to have with him?" "None whatsoever. What we had was based on my accepting limitations that weren't real and his need to feel superior to someone he claimed to love." that's not a foundation I would ever want to build on again. The conversation reminded me how profoundly my understanding of relationships had evolved. My marriage to Nathan was built on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine partnership. We challenged each other professionally, supported each other personally, and created something together that enhanced both our individual capabilities and our combined potential. Cross Financial Group continued expanding over the following year, adding wealth management services and opening a fourth office in Portland. The business had grown beyond what Nathan and I had originally envisioned, but it maintained the culture and values that had made our initial success possible. "We've built something that will outlast both of us," Nathan observed during one of our strategic planning sessions. "That's the definition of sustainable success." He was right. Cross Financial Group employed over 80 people, served hundreds of clients across multiple industries, and had established itself as a leader in community-focused financial services. More importantly, we'd developed systems and cultures that could continue generating positive outcomes regardless of any individual's involvement. My personal evolution felt equally sustainable. The confidence and competence I'd developed weren't dependent on external circumstances or other people's opinions. I'd learned to trust my judgment, value my contributions, and build relationships based on mutual respect rather than emotional dependency. 5 years after Derek had left me stranded at a bank, humiliated and financially vulnerable, I owned that same bank as part of a financial services empire I'd helped create. But the real victory wasn't the professional success or financial security, satisfying as those achievements were. The real victory was knowing that I'd become exactly who I was always capable of being, and that no one could ever take that away from me again. Standing in my San Francisco office one morning, looking out at the bustling city below, I thought about the woman I'd been and the woman I'd become. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been easy, but every challenge had taught me something valuable about my own resilience and potential. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Kim. "New client wants to meet about a $50 million portfolio. When are you available?" I smiled, checking my calendar for available appointments. Just another day in a life I'd built from scratch, brick by careful brick, decision by determined decision. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities I was confident I could handle, whatever they might bring. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.